There's a total of 17 Daedric princes within the Elder Scrolls universe who have a vested interest in Nirn. Among them, we see 15 who have Daedric shrine quests to offer to the player. These often result in unique and powerful rewards being given out to you. One of the two missing though is Mehrunes Dagon himself, the big baddie for this game. He's centered around the main questline, and therefore, Bethesda's decision in excluding him from the shrine quests makes sense. Technically, we never did get to interact with him too much beyond the main story, but one of the plugins does give fans a way to reap the rewards of this godly entity. In today's video, I'm going to be going through and discussing the Mehrunes Razor expansion featured in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. Mehrunes Razor was the 5th DLC to be released for this installment and came out on June 16th of 2006. As we'll all come to see, it isn't quite like the rest of the minor add-ons for this game. Instead of a player home, ancient astronomy tower, random loot drops, or armor for your noble steed, this one is purely a dungeon crawl. Potentially a sight for sore eyes to some, as most of the other expansions have felt pretty identical to one another in terms of what they offer. This DLC is centered around its main quest, called Unearthing Mehrunes Razor, and I'm about to get into everything that it entails, including a new enemy faction, Dagon's champion, uncovered alien ruins, and of course, the powerful artifact itself. As per usual, the facts and information provided are brought to you by the game itself and the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages. This add-on begins with the player installing it and booting up the game. Practically immediately, you'll receive a quest notification giving you details on some of the latest rumors. They say, "I've heard talk of a lost alien city called Varsa Baalim, where Mehrunes Razor is hidden. If I search the ruins of Sundercliff Watch in the eastern Niben, I may be able to find the lost city and recover this powerful Daedric artifact." Unlike most of the other DLCs, there are no notes or letters to help kick off the adventure. However, plenty of lore and scripture awaits within the dungeons. Getting straight to it and popping open the map, Sundercliff Watch is located in the eastern part of Cyrodiil, right beside Lake Candlemas. Before embarking on this journey, it's a really good idea to have all of your equipment repaired, charged, and consumables refilled. From the Imperial City, I fast traveled over to Periite's Shrine, one of my closer known locations to the tower, and galloped on over. Arriving outside, Sundercliff looks like any other abandoned fort within the game. It's a destroyed tower, overgrown with foliage. Looking around the exterior, there isn't too much to note beyond the door that leads inside. Entering into the watch, the story begins, and the horrors within await. I received a quest update that my search for Mehrunes Razor has officially begun. The entrance area was quite intriguing. Before I could really get a good look around though, I spotted someone else in here with me. They were patrolling up and down the attached cave system, and as soon as they noticed me, they were immediately hostile. Their nameplate placed them as a Drothmeri soldier. He had a torso piece on that is soon to be revealed as a Drothmeri tunic, yet sported some higher level armor like ebony gauntlets, greaves, and boots. He wasn't too tricky of a fight, and I did end up nerfing myself a bit by using Goldbrand's fire enchantment. I had a few questions upon his defeat, but decided to continue to look around for a bit, as I knew they wouldn't get answered just yet. This area of the fort certainly seems like it's long since been swallowed by the earth. Statues are toppled, walls are half submerged in the ground, and there are some fairly odd tools and workers' apparatus laying around. Continuing along through the aforementioned cave system, I eventually came upon a door that had an abandoned knapsack beside it. Peering into the bag, there was a small diary within. Taking it prompts a quest update, and the book itself reads, "Dear Diary, today I go to see my cousin. Mother said it was a blessed day, which I think means she's going to miss me. I'll miss her too, but I'm real excited to see cousin Drothan again. I promise to write again real soon. Dear Diary, I met a rider on the road today. He called himself a courier. He gave me a letter from cousin Drothan. It says I'll have a special job when I get to Cyrodiil. I will be a steward. Cousin says stewards keep track of who comes and goes, but somebody will do most of that for me, and I just need to only let people in who know the secret word. That's a very big responsibility. It says I have to tear up his note. Cousin is very smart. I better write down the password so I don't forget it. It's Keimer. Dear Diary, today I saw a wood elf. Dear Diary, another courier found me today with another letter from cousin. This letter said that he may not be around when I get there. Cousin said his journal will tell me everything I need to know about finding him if he's not around, and I should find it in his cabin. Uh-oh, I'm no good at reading, only writing. Dear Diary, I'm finally here. Before I use the special word to get in, I have something I need to tell you. Diary, it's not personal, but diaries are kid stuff, and I have to be grown up here. So I'm leaving you behind right here. But thank you, Diary, especially for keeping the special word safe. Good luck. Approaching the door and interacting with it, I received a notification that a voice beyond calls out the phrase, "Who gathers storm clouds over Nirn?" And knowing the password, my character responds by saying Chimer. The doors open, and standing behind them is the Drothmeri steward. He comes in for the attack, and he too is kitted out with the Drothmeri tunic and high-level armor. He's able to get a few hits in on me, to which I unfortunately contracted the disease Tunnel Cough, a brand new one added by this DLC. It drains the player's sneak skill by 15 points. After defeating him, I peered into his inventory and noticed something called a steward's note. Picking it up, it reads, Vask, your job is to see that our arrivals and departures are well documented and that their wages are paid. And keep an eye on my dear cousin. It is not to gossip with every new recruit about our far-reaching plans. We've already captured one assassin prowling the caves. The last thing we need is some spy of Helsith's hearing all our goals from you. Commander Adrethi will debrief the troops as necessary at his own discretion. On Turtis, I'm taking a detachment through the doorway with me. I don't know how long I'll be gone, but in the unlikely case that there is cause to disrupt my excursion, read the most recent entry in my journal. You'll find it in my cabin, on the desk. Don't go in there for any other reason. Discretion above all. We don't want our Imperial enemies to know what our plans are. Death to the Empire. Archmage Frathen Drothan. On the steward's desk just behind his corpse, amongst the jewels, gold, scales, and ink, is the steward's registry. Taking a look at it, it doesn't really provide any direct lore or valuable insight, but it does detail the payments, comings and goings, and recruitments of the Drothmeri army. They have soldiers, couriers, and mages placed at different sites and outposts within the dungeon, certainly showing that this little spelunking trip has a lot more going on here than meets the eye. Moving forward, I ran into more Drothmeri troops. These ones were just recruits, and all things considered, even with their high-level gear, they didn't pose as big of a threat as enemies that were coming up. This dungeon run is an excellent way for the player to secure more leveled and enchanted loot, which can completely elevate your character, or be used to just earn more gold. Just ahead of this space was the final room in the first zone. Here, I came across the other common varieties of Drothmeri troops. Recruits, soldiers, and veterans. As mentioned before, the soldiers put up a decent fight, and dare I say, the veterans even gave me a run for my money. They all fought with pretty much the same setup, it's just that the veterans had a wider range of skills, more health, and abilities that they could pick from, including powerful destruction magic. Once the room was cleared, I made my way over to what was probably the most interesting area, at least to me, Sundercliff Village. The village was exactly as it sounds. An entire community of housing built far into the earth of Nirn. They shared the same structure and aesthetic as buildings you would see in Breville. There were drawbridges connecting both sides, campfires, hutches, and supplies laid out all around them. This area really was something else. It makes you wonder how vast their army is, how long they've been down here, and how much work has really gone into making this hole in the ground their home. I stuck my way up to one of the canteens and entered inside. These spaces are used as barracks, lodging, community centers, etc., and inside most of them, there are a variety of Drothmeri enemies, ranging in rank. Back outside, there were a lot more enemies in the sector. They patrolled around the perimeters, walking along the upper ridges and lower canyons, relaxing at the campfires, etc. Before continuing onwards, I decided that now would be a good time to work my way through their numbers and start cutting down the opposing forces. Things got pretty dicey at certain sections. Again, it was mostly the veterans that gave me issues, and it didn't really help that I was getting ganged up on by the inferior ones. Once most of their unit was taken care of, I resumed my exploration and ended up wandering into their makeshift jail. I noticed a holding cell of some sorts and heard an elf talk to me from the other side, although I couldn't see them, so I assumed it was a Drothmeri. Actually picking the lock and getting a better look, it turned out to be an assassin for the Morag Tong. They were friendly, but unfortunately not very talkative. Wondering what he was doing in these parts, and specifically why he was imprisoned, I searched the jail for some context and landed on the jailer's letter. It reads, "Vilnius, keep searching for the writ that assassin carries. The patrolmen have searched the tunnels in hopes that he dumped it when he was found out, but he may carry it on his person yet. If that's the case, I shudder to think where it's hidden. Try sneaking in there while he's sleeping to search the cell, and by Nerevar, get to work building that second cell. I don't want to execute that assassin until we find out who he came for, and Sardova needs some place to lock up the workers when they get out of line. Signed, Commander Adrethi." Now from here, there are a few optional things to do with the Morag Tong assassin. One thing that can be done is kill him. He's arguably no tougher than the Drothmeri soldiers, and his armor and their enchantments are quite useful and interesting. On his body though, he does carry something called a soiled writ of assassination, which you can probably piece together where he was hiding it. Taking it, it reads off the classic, "Commander Talani Adrethi. The aforementioned personage has been marked for honorable execution in accordance to the lawful tradition and practice of the Morag Tong Guild. The bearer of this non-disputable document has official sanctioned license to kill the aforementioned personage." So, it seems like multiple parties and factions have a mutual interest in this questline, which is pretty neat. The other option for the assassin is to set him free and let him carry out his work. He'll become your only ally down here in these parts, and for what lies ahead, that can definitely prove to be useful. He'll sneak out, pop an invisibility potion, and head towards his mark. The rest of the village area and the houses within don't really offer much more to the player besides some basic loot and more enemies to face. Connecting to the village is a variety of pathways and cave systems leading to a few different zones. The next one that corresponds with the current part of the story is the Sundercliff commune. The commune also consists of a chasm surrounded by high ridges and lookout points. There are reinforcements standing guard on the other side, and similar to what's happened before, they have to be taken out. On the lower level is a building that's titled the Veterans Lodge. At first, I was worried that I'd have to take on maybe 2 or 3 of them at a time, but expressed a sigh of relief when there was only one of them to be found in here. There are quite a few chests to loot, including a boss leveled one, so it isn't necessarily a waste of time to go exploring in here. With the choice of either ascending up the platforms to the upper level or navigating through a passageway connecting to the lower one, I chose the latter. It was a brief exploration, and at the end of the passage, there was a lone guard standing in front of some sort of sealed entranceway. Getting in closer and taking on the guard, I soon got a quest update telling me that this was the doorway into Varsa Baalim, and that the 2 pedestals should be my clue on how to get in. The enchanted pedestals could be activated, but upon doing so, it simply told me that nothing had happened. Attempts at walking up to the door were futile, as the enchantment blocks me from going any further. With no other options, I turned around and ascended to the top of the commune. Here, there were a few more patrolling guards to take care of, and buildings to enter inside of. One of those buildings was the Yeoman Barracks, a small house holding 1 recruit and smaller treasures. Another one though was exactly where my quest marker was pointing to, and it just so happened to be Frothin Drothin's quarters. Inside, there was a variety of unique loot, as pointed out by the UESP, scrolls of transmutation, 2 bottles of Trichobazor extract, treatise of Aleatic cities, a receipt from the famed Jobasha's bookseller on Vardenfell, and most importantly, Drothin's journal. Looking at it, it gives the player a quest update, and its actual contents read, 12th of Morningstar, Sadrith Mora. Traitors all. Helsith and all the lapdogs in the great houses care nothing for the heresy of allowing the Empire to command the lives of our noble Dunmer people. Even my fickle Telvanni kinsmen apathetically consent to this outrage. Once I have raised my army and topple the atrocious empire of men, then they shall all pay for their complacency. The 6th of First Seed, Vivek. I could hardly bear the journey here to deal with that filthy bookseller, but it was worth it. The treatise on Aleatic cities I bartered for provided the last bit of evidence I needed. I'm now convinced that I can find the Nefarivigum beneath Sundercliff Watch, just inside Cyrodiil's border. The 2nd of Arain's Hand, Kraganmore. The Drothmeri army grows in might. Our forward detachment is ready to escort me within Cyrodiil's borders, where they shall bolster themselves for the assault, whilst I claim my prize under the mountain. The 17th of Rain's Hand, Kraganmore. It's getting harder to find mercenaries. I may have to consider employing some of the beast folk. Must remember to discuss this with Adrethi before we depart for Sundercliff. The 26th of Rain's Hand, Sundercliff Keep. The Nefarivigum must be near. I can feel power emanating from this place. Now, I've only to find it and overcome the task to earn Mehrunes' razor. Wielding this fearsome relic, I'll lead the Drothmeri army to victory against the Imperial tyrants. The 14th of 2nd Seed, Sundercliff Keep. We finally uncovered the entrance to Varsa Baalim. I'm going to take a detachment of men inside with me to find the Nefarivigum. We already discovered an assassin prowling the camp. I fear that Helseth may have sent him. To be safe, I'm going to seal myself in the city until we can recover the razor. I left 2 Bezors, cut from the belly of an albino guar, in the care of Commander Adrethi and the Forge Master. If there is some emergency, they have only to place these on the pedestals outside the door to dispel my barrier, and open the way to Varsa Baalim. Now, the UESP suggests reading the Treatise on Aleatic Cities for more background information, and trust me, it does not disappoint. It begins with, I will not be the first scholar to point to a combination of benign intent and arrogance on behalf of the Aleads as the source of many ruinous affairs for the old Heartland elves. The Nefarivigum, a foul construct of Mehrunes Dagon, was erected to be ever watchful for the pilgrim who would approach it, and best an unknown trial of worth. It is said that such a pilgrim would be rewarded with the blessing of Mehrunes' razor, a vicious blade through which Dagon himself can claim the very souls of those it strikes. Benign intent compelled Alead folk to seek out the Nefarivigum. Arrogance let them believe themselves capable of disbarring any who would seek the razor. So was built Varsa Baalim, a great ringed labyrinthine city during the height of Alead rule. Sure as death, pilgrims came to Varsa Baalim, and for years, the elves drove back many, until it came to pass that a vampire slipped into the city unnoticed. Merfolk were touched with the foul affliction, throwing the city into a gathering storm of madness and ruin, and soon, it seemed none was left to prevent the razor from being recovered. Then suddenly, Varsa Baalim was gone. Historic accounts dispute whether it happened through some final safety, a natural cataclysm, or by the touch of the divines themselves. Whatever the cause, history agrees on the result. The mountains of the eastern Niben swallowed Varsa Baalim and the Nefarivigum with it, where it has remained hidden since the early days of the First Era. If the tale is true, somewhere on the eastern fringes of the Niben Valley, where man's rule has scarcely reached through the years, the Nefarivigum still lies in wait, among a city of unliving abominations entombed within the cold bowels of the mountain. It was at this point, and after reading all of that the story really began to unravel for me. Exiting Drothin's quarters, the quest markers now split off into 2 different directions, each pertaining to one of the bearers that I would need to kill. The closer of the 2 happened to lead me right into the house next to Drothin's, the commander's quarters. Now, remember the Morag Tong assassin from a little bit ago? If he was left alive, he would have actually had already made his way inside of the quarters and began his execution on the commander. Together, with his help, the fight went smoothly and really well. We went swing for swing on him, our blades danced across his armor and pierced his skin. Soon, the commander was slain, and the Morag Tong assassin went on his way, and I never saw him again. As expected, the commander had some pretty decent loot on his body, various enchanted armor pieces and jewelry that could easily enhance her gameplay. On the upper floor, in his sleeping area, the first of the enchanted Bezors was found, and all I needed now was to collect the other one. As mentioned in Drothin's letters, the Forge Master possessed the second one, and getting to the Forge Master would prove to be a little more difficult than getting to the commander. Returning back to the village area, there was a doorway on the other side that led into the Forge Zone. The catch with this part of the Forge, though, was that it consisted of a series of tunnels and pathways, holding numerous Drothmeri troops, and even the newly introduced laborer. The laborers are mostly beast folk, brought in from the nearby provinces of Blackmarsh and elsewhere, and they fought with some newly added tools repurposed as weapons, in this case, the 2-handed heavy rake. In terms of efficiency and usefulness, the rake wasn't that great as a weapon, but it certainly felt cool and fun to swing around. Not too long into the passages, I came across a door leading to the Sundercliff mines. The mines contained mostly laborers, fighting with basic farming and cultivating equipment, and a few guards to monitor and watch their progress. As detailed in its name, the mines were used to harvest ores and natural resources from the crust. There were platforms, tents, carts, bridges, fires, benches, just about everything the laborers would need to literally set up camp in these parts, and it was a detail that I could definitely appreciate in terms of immersion. Soon, the mines came to an end and led me back into the lower portions of the forge. The first part of the zone had brought me to a smithy, which was where I fought against the weapons apprentice. He was the first non-Mer or Beastfolk NPC I came across, and he fought decently well. He had Nordslayer gauntlets on his person, which were Daedric in their craftsmanship, and had the ability to resist frost for 30%. On the table in his camp, there was an apprentice's note that read, "Forge Master, when next you can take leave, I wish to speak with you. I know you had reservations about allowing me to assume more duties, but I think you'll reconsider when I recount for you some of the atrocious things my counterpart has said in your absence." This letter doesn't necessarily help out the main story at hand, but I'm always in the mood to hear a little bit about the in-game drama and gossip. Walking a little further through the connected tunnels, it brought me to the next smithy station. This was where the armor was forged, and the armor apprentice was right there to aggro onto me and begin his assault. I would place him at about the same skill level as his counterpart, and on his person, he had the boots of the Taskmaster, which were also Daedric in their craftsmanship and fortified athletics for 20 points. Just beyond this apprentice were a few more laborers to take out. In front of their sleeping area, on a table, was a note titled, "Letter Home." It reads, "Courier's notice, conveyance via Narcissus, Belfalls, Vivek, Saran, personal correspondence, origin withheld. I miss you more with each passing night. My only comfort is knowing that the wages I'm earning now will ensure our comfort when I return." I couldn't believe the pay this lunatic was offering, and I doubt we would have followed him all the way to Cyrodiil otherwise. The fool thinks he'll overthrow the Empire. Viramina take him. I figure we'll end up deserting soon, just as soon as we've gotten as much pay as we can without actually following this addled madman into battle. We've hardly crossed the border, but already, I can tell you, Cyrodiil is an awful place. We have nothing but iron to work with. There's no art to iron armor. I tried using the bones of beasts killed in the local forest, but they are brittle and won't bear the force of the hammer. Even with decent materials, this would be a dull post. We must be a mile underground and a league from civilization. I don't envy the courier who carries this letter. I pass the time in conversation with the other apprentice. We always seem to have a good laugh at the expense of the Forge Master, in private of course. I can't wait to see your family home in Saran. I've never actually been to Vardenfell. I've heard much of its charm. I'm pleased and surprised to hear that you've begun saving for our home already. You say you're working for someone named Desolé? The pay must be very good, but when I return, you won't need to keep it up. You never mentioned, by the way, what sort of work you're doing. I'm still not sure how this crazy wizard is paying wages for us and his army of mercenaries and laborers. We don't use half the ore mined here for smithing, so I figured he must sell the surplus iron, but I see no evidence of it. Nor do I think it would produce such a fortune. I think he's Telvanni. Perhaps folk in the area near you have heard if he's from wealthy stock. I fear I must conclude, my love. The Forge Master is demanding another parcel of iron-shod boots. How many more pairs could we possibly need? This letter makes me laugh, as if you know what Desolé's House of Earthly Delights is, you'll know what the apprentice's lover does for work. It was neat to see how the weaponsmith was planning to go behind the armorsmith and use what he thought was their friendly banter against the other for personal gain. This note also shed some light on how the army and workers of Drothan truly feel about their work and time spent down here. They're losing faith in their leader and likely can't take much more of these conditions. Beyond this smithy is a small room that contains the Forge Master. He fought well, but didn't seem much tankier or tougher than his apprentices. He had some really amazing loot on his body. The Forge Master's amulet and the Forge Master's smock seemed the most interesting to me, as they certainly would have buffed up my warrior stats nicely. Near his corpse was the Forge Master's tent, and on the inside there was a boss level chest and the enchanted Bazor. Picking it up grants the player with another quest update, and now it was time to return back to the commune. Following the passageways further into the forge led me to a false wall that brought me back into the upper areas of the forge, and ultimately into the village. Interestingly, it seemed as though a bunch of the patrolling guards in this zone had respawned. There were a handful of them walking around in open, previously explored areas, and I knew that I hadn't missed them from before. Regardless, I cleared a path through and moseyed on towards the doors of Varsa Baalim. Interacting with both pedestals, I placed a Bazor in each of them, and doing so gave me a quest update. I had successfully dispelled the magical barrier and could now follow Drothan into the Cursed City. However, from what I've gathered and learned, the next steps to acquiring the Razor wouldn't be so easy, as the real dangers and monsters of the dungeon lay ahead. Going on through the doors, I was brought to the site of the alien ruin. Descending down some steps, the scene quickly turned sour as there was a plethora of human remains and bones piled up, along with what seemed like fresh splatters of blood streamed across the floor. Getting a sickening feeling of what's to come, I continued onwards and found myself crossing an enclosed bridge. As soon as I stepped foot on it, my torch went out, and through the openings on the walls, I could see shadowy figures darting across the other side of the room, chasing after a lone survivor wielding a torch. With not much more to go off of, I walked along ahead, following more remains and bloodstains, until arriving at the next zone for Varsa Baalim. This area was vast and massive. It was an open cavern, and from where I came out from, I was able to overlook a battle going on beneath me. It was seemingly the Drothmeri army facing off against the vampires, and as I expected, the vampires dominated the Mer and slew them. Now at first, I was a little worried for fighting them myself. It's always a treat to fight vampires, and I wasn't sure how powerful they were going to be. However, after the first few encounters, I was sort of relieved that they would be the bulk of my foes down here, as not only did my enemies no longer have a resistance to fire, they actually now had a weakness to it, making Goldbrand's enchantments that much more effective. After clearing this space of Varsa Baalim, I found myself in the next zone titled Kava Beldameld. This little space only contained one vampire archer, and upon his defeat, I was spat right back out into the upper levels of Varsa Baalim. There were more battles going on between the Drothmeri and the undead. In this instance, I was rooting for the undead to come out on top because playing cleanup crew with them would be a whole lot easier. By the end of it, only a singular soldier of the army remained, and he was a pretty simple kill. In the corridors ahead, there were bodies of various veterans and recruits laying lifeless in the dungeon, indicating to me that the Dark Elves probably weren't winning the war at hand. Dropping down and continuing with the slaughter, I cut my way through more of the vampires before arriving at a new zone called Kava Merspanga. Here, the corridors and hallways were tight and ever winding. In a medium-sized room just ahead, surprise surprise, there were more ongoing fights. Again, my allegiances were with the undead here, and in an instance of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, I found myself aiding the vampires with this one. Of course, once almost every foe was eliminated, they set their sights on me, and it became business as usual. Just up ahead was a door leading back out into Varsa Baalim. Slashing, cutting, and stabbing my way through the masses of vampires and Drothmeri warriors, I soon came upon a well leading further down into Lorkhan knows where, but my eye was caught by a dead recruit in one of the nooks of the caverns. On his person, he had an undelivered letter. It reads, "Philid, it's so dark in this place. We were beset by the monsters after discovering this accursed city under the mountain. I was separated from most of the others in the madness, watched men 10 times my superior fall in combat against them. I'll never forget their screams echoing in the vastness, nor the blood splashing against the pale stones, staining the faces of our attackers in their cannibalistic frenzy. Drothan's a madman. I should have listened to you, brother. I was so eager to prove myself, to be a part of something. I was so proud to send a part of my wages home to Mother. Please, tell her I died honorably. I volunteered for Drothan's escort into this forsaken city, watched as he sealed the door behind us. When the slaughter began, I saw him flee in the shadows. Dagon take the swit. I left Mournhold to prove myself, and only proven to be a fool. This place is cold, Muthsera, and the screams are diminishing. I fear they may start hunting for the rest of us soon. I cannot find my way out, and their eyes are so keen in the murky dark. I know this letter will never reach you, brother, but Vivek willing, when the winds blow east over the peaks of Valis and Velothi, may they carry my final thoughts to you. I love you, brother. I'm so sorry. Farewell." Again, I'm truly fascinated with the additions of these little blurbs and notes. They really help to paint a picture of the current climate within Drothan's army, their true feelings about this conquest, and their waning faith in the Telvanni wizard. Notes aside, the aforementioned alien well leading down was actually the entrance into the Nefarivigum. The final site was right before me, and eager to claim Mehrunes' razor, I went on through its doors. The immediate area within the Nefarivigum contained the aftermath of some final battle. There were both dead Drothmeri warriors as well as vampires laying around. The atmosphere and scene within here was certainly different to all the rest, as it was darker and more sinister. The walls emitted a red glow, and the air was still and eerie. Descending further down, I was brought to the last important room featured in the Mehrunes' Razor plugin. There were signs of Daedric activity in here, as demonic spires and spikes had erupted from the ground. Smoke rose from specific areas throughout the room, and there was a sleeping roll with a journal next to it in one of its quadrants. At the far end of the room, though, there was a man in robes, standing before a crimson statue of sorts. Approaching and getting in closer, the robed figure turned around and began attacking me. It was Frothan Drothan, the Telvanni boss himself, and he came in swinging with a Daedric claymore. As much as I'd like to say that I was toying with him and playing around, he did get some pretty good hits in. He was able to drop my health to low amounts, and he summoned Clanfear to help defend him. But alas, Drothan couldn't keep up and succumbed to his wounds inflicted by my longblade. Upon his death, I received a quest update saying that he and the Drothmeri army no longer posed a threat to the Empire. Although the main threat for this questline was eliminated, there was still the matter of going through this mysterious Crimson Warrior and retrieving the razor. I went over to Drothan's bedroll and peered at his field journal, curious to see what he had documented. It reads, "This room appears to have been built around the original site of the Nefarivigum, but there is no sign of Mehrunes' razor. There is some sort of statue of a man here, and some scattered inscriptions in the stonework. Perhaps they can give me some clues." At first, I thought the runes were useless, but I was able to piece together a phrase. Kinverum Dagon Nefarivigum. Speaking the words aloud in that order caused the razor to materialize. Alas, the way to it is blocked, and I dare not risk force lest the gate is trapped. I must search for some clues. I have discovered more inscriptions etched as to be nearly imperceivable to my eyes. After much labor, I discovered some clues as to the man entombed here. It seems he was a champion to Dagon who failed in some great task. The kin, it says Dremora, carved his chest open through flesh, armor, and bone with the razor itself. He stands guard now as a test for those worthy to claim the weapon. What sort of test can this be? The runes mention the ability of the razor to instantly send a struck foe to oblivion through Dagon's wrath. This corroborates many tales of the weapon, but can it really be so powerful as to kill instantly? The task seems so simple now that I've given it thought. He who travels here, draws the heart from the chest of the champion, and devours it, must be worthy to wield the razor. I am wary to proceed, and wonder if there is another way, but the power of the blade is so near. I must ponder my next move. As it turns out, in fact, there are a variety of next moves the player can experiment with. The first one I tried was bypassing the Crimson Warrior, or as his nameplate puts him as, Sire Faethung, and approached the gate directly. When interacting with it, I was told that I was defying Dagon's task, and prompted to force open the gate myself. Selecting yes, because my strength was over 90, it worked, and I was free to take the razor. In an almost jump scare-like manner, Faethung came to life and lunged at me, shooting me back into the blade. Upon getting near it, my character ended up collecting it and adding it into their inventory, prompting a notification from the game that I've completed unearthing Mehrunes' razor. However, I still had to fight against Sire Faethung. It took the form of a male Nord, clad in Daedric armor and wielding a war axe. It put up a decent fight and even rivaled the abilities of Frothan Drothan. We went swing for swing on one another, and he managed to get my health down by about 1/3. In the end though, I delivered the killing blow, and that was it for this encounter. As mentioned before though, there are a few ways to tackle this room. The next one I tried involved leaving Drothan alone, and sneaking up to the gate, forcing it open again. This then caused Faethung to come to life, and duke things out with Drothan instead of me. I watched in silence from afar as the two fought, and in the end, Faethung was the one to come out on top. The spectacle was short-lived though, as Sire then came over to me and began attacking. The last method I tried involved ignoring Drothan once again, and I ended up stealing the beating heart from Faethung. For fun, I decided to consume it, and the game notified me that a dark energy was coursing through my veins. Devouring the heart gives the player porphyric hemophilia and cannibal's prion. a new disease that drains agility and intelligence for 20 points. Through this method, both of the baddies began attacking me, but most interestingly, Phaethon turned from the Crimson statue figure into his original Nord form, and because his heart was taken, he slowly loses health until he drops dead. Whichever way you choose to approach this encounter, it all leads to the same outcome, securing Mehrunes' razor. Behind the dagger is a door that leads into an area called the Forgotten Tunnels. Within them, I meandered through a cave system, killed a few nuisance creatures, and found the exit leading into the Nibene Basin. Emerging from the bottom of Lake Candalus, I fast traveled back to the Imperial City, and there, my adventures to unearth Mehrunes' razor came to a close. Now, let's talk about the razor. The whole point of this questline was to retrieve Dagon's artifact, and it's finally in my hands. The razor certainly has a unique and distinctive look to it. Its design is unlike any I've seen in the game before, and with a durability of 100, its overall damage rating was 20 for me. Perhaps more interesting than its damage rating and appearance was its enchantments. It had the ability to disintegrate armor for 15 points over a duration of 7 seconds. But it also had a strange power called Daedric Banishing. With the charge leading to 49 uses, I decided here and now in the capital was the time to put it to use. The blade was honestly awesome. At its core level, it was a powerful dagger that had extended reach. It inflicted decent amounts of damage, and of course, its attack speed was its claim to fame as a minute blade. As detailed prior, Daedric Banishing is pretty overpowered. There's a small chance that it gets activated upon each hit. It actually has to do with the player's luck rating. When it does get activated though, the victim drops dead immediately, and the game displays the message, "Through the razor, Mehrunes Dagon claims this soul." Interestingly, per every time an NPC falls victim to the dagger's enchantment, the game keeps a tally on how many things were killed this way. Although, there isn't much use for it besides data and for the player to keep track of. As mentioned before, Daedric Banishment works off of luck percentage. The highest chances a player can get for having the enchantment activated is 11%, and that's if the player's luck is at around 200. This definitely gave me a really fun idea though, to do a playthrough using Mehrunes' razor only and with luck boosted to its maximum. Nevertheless, this is a beautiful and fun weapon type to play with, and it's one that I'm looking forward to using more of. Real quick, something I've been dying to mention is a hidden test cell room that was left in for the Varsa Baalim portion of the dungeon. When the player enters the first part of the Iliad City, where you see vampires hunting down the Drothmeri, by toggling collision, you can fly out to them and find a hidden zone called Unused Cell. By entering inside, you'll be placed on a floating platform, surrounded by nothingness, and accompanied by the vampire sorcerer and Drothmeri recruit that were active in the beginning. They're friendly and can be spoken to, although they don't offer much for dialogue. The best part about it, and in my opinion, the scariest part of this whole adventure, is the message displayed in the upper left corner that simply says, "You should not be here." I love how the developers acknowledged that players would get curious and go exploring out of bounds. Although, beyond this, there isn't much more to it, and it was just something neat that I wanted to showcase. To recap the events that occurred, through rumors, the player hears of Mehrunes' razor's last known location as being under Sundercliff watch. Heading inside of there, you stumble upon a small army of dark elves, and a lot of them have seemingly immigrated from Morrowind recently. They're called the Drothmeri Army and are led by Frothan Drothan, a Telvanni wizard whose goal is to overthrow the current empire, as he's fairly unhappy with the current state of politics over in Morrowind. Likely using his army of Dunmer and the power of the Razor, I suspect his plan was to amass more numbers and charge the capital head on. Utilizing the dagger's Daedric Banishment, he probably could have at least instilled fear in the minds of his opposition, as facing him could result in having your soul sent straight to the Deadlands for eternal torment. Down under Sundercliff, the Drothmeri created a small village of sorts. There, the laborers mined and excavated resources in order to make weapons and armor for their armies. For a small and low-key operation, and looking in from the outside, they seemed very self-sufficient and disciplined. However, as their personal writings and scriptures would indicate, many began to lose faith in their conquests and began to doubt Frothan's leadership. Anticipating trouble, as was evident with the Morag Tong assassin, Drothan locked himself and many others in the ruins of Varsa Baalim, handing the two keys, or enchanted Bezors, over to his most trusted seconds in command. The catch, however, is that the ruins of Varsa Baalim were overrun with ancient vampires, as the once great Iliad city, long since sealed off from the outside due to greed and pride, had a small invasion occur, which led to the entire remaining population turning into vampires. These undead abominations massacred and feasted on the Drothmeri army, all whilst Frathen slipped away, undetected, to the final resting spot of Mehrunes' razor. There was one last challenge before him though, devouring the beating heart of Dagon's exiled champion and becoming a being of darkness himself. Ciri Feithung, the aforementioned Crimson Warrior, was once Dagon's trusted fighter. He failed in an unknown task though, and as punishment, the Dremora carved out his heart using the razor and cursed him to stand guard to the dagger until someone could best him. Honestly, the story here is really interesting, and I'm really glad that I left this add-on until last. It was a lot of fun, it featured some new concepts that I hadn't seen before in this game, it presented new lore and facts for the fanbase to ponder on and process, and above all else, it gave the player an artifact relating to the Prince of Destruction himself. I'd love to know your thoughts on this DLC, and until next time, keep on adventuring.